Perfect. Hello and welcome to another episode of Tea with ALSA. Today I'm joined by a lovely guest who is working across the Web3 ecosystem. Now I'm going to let him introduce himself and what he is doing, and we'll jump right into it.
Hey, thank you for having me. So my name is Dite, and I've been building in crypto and growing in crypto for the last almost 10 years. And currently I'm working on a new application that is called Web3 Wiz, which we can get a bit later. But I'm a mix of a techie and a geek, and also learning how to sell and marketing. And of course, I'm originally from Pristina. And I'm currently based in Valencia, Spain.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm going to jump straight into this because we were just talking about this. So you are building your own startup. You've worked across multiple startups yourself. And one of the topics we were just talking about was how a lot of current, I guess, more modern startups are building products without any real problem to solve. With Web3 Wiz, I know you gave a brief explanation, but for the people listening, Web3 Wiz is a no-code. Am I correct in saying that? It's a
Yeah.
no-code site application where people will be able to essentially create DeFi. What else would it be?
Yeah, so pretty much before you butcher the whole thing,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, what is it? Is it like a token? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, pretty much what it is that I've been developing all these decentralized applications for the while. And after some time, I just figured that I'm doing the same thing all over again, right? So, you go in, you do architecture, you get the designs, you do the infrastructure and everything else. And so what happens is that I thought, oh, is there some way to kind of like productize this? And I took all the lessons and best practices and I made Web3 Wiz, and that allows you to use, if you got a smart contract and you want to build a decentralized application around it or a set of smart contracts, you just go in there and you kind of leapfrog the development, and you end up with interfaces to interact with these smart contracts. And then you can import them in any website that you want your users to see with any theme that you like. And they're kind of like fast, safe, and secure.
Yeah. Thank you for not butchering your own sales pitch right there. There's one thing I've noticed about you. So we met on Twitter because I noticed that you were essentially building online, which has kind of become a common thing across founders. But I guess going back to the main question, which I had around founders, a lot of the time building products, but they're not being a problem to actually solve, which becomes harder for them to scale that. From your perspective, how did you get to the point where you're like, okay, I've been working on this, or what have you done to make sure that the product you're building actually has a use case and will be utilized by people? What are you doing to A/B test that in the current stages that you're building right now?
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really a good question. I think the main idea is, well, let me go back to the guy who really has the best essays on startups, and that's Paul Graham. And what he says is that in order for a startup to scale and kind of become big, you usually need a few miracles. Okay. And so, for example, if you look at the Uber, they needed a behavior miracle. People should be okay with having strangers in their car and getting in their stranger's car. And so if that miracle works and everything else gets well executed, then you got a multi-billion-dollar company. If you look at Google, that was more of a technical miracle, right? So, okay, I go to the internet, I have some kind of intent. I want to find the best coffee in town. Can you build the tech that actually maps the real world and gives me that answer, right? And, Google, as we all know, became a multi-billion-dollar company. And so now, going back to startups, if you have a startup where you need 2 or 3 miracles to happen, then you're in the red zone. everybody, So I think I see a lot of that with the blockchain startups, like you were talking. And in terms of Web3 Wiz, it's quite a simple way. Like, I've been building this, and I basically I'm automating what I was doing manually for years. And as long as people are going to be building in this space, they're going to be looking for novel ways to make it. Now, let's call it the miracle with me or with Web3 Wiz is the whole idea of how can you make an app in such a way that allows you to build these things and kind of gives an output that is usable. Okay, so there's a bit of tech there, but then I also do see a bit on users and customers kind of adjusting their mindset, because it's kind of like before WordPress was there, people hired somebody to get them a website, and then you go, oh, you can do it yourself, and people kind of freak out. And I'm kind of in that stage right now. The initial feedback, I'm like, hey, here, go use this tool and build your own front ends. And people are like, what about you do it for me? And I just give me the output. And so that kind of works, but it's like a learning curve where I'm like generating stuff for people, and I'm like, can you make it a bit more like this? And eventually I hopefully want to move in a stage where people, without having to interact with me, they go in, they build their dApp, and they leave the virtual store with something that they like, and then they can take that to their users. So I think that's kind of like the experiment that you're running, because every new venture is a bit of an experiment. You have a hypothesis, and you're trying to test it, and failure rates are brutal, as you know. So you have to be very open-minded, and you have to really approach it with almost like a scientist code type of situation, with all of your biases as much as you can removed, and looking at things from the customer's perspective.
The thing is, you mentioned pretty much an introvert's dream. You don't get to interact with me. You can just do it online, which is the thing I noticed, because when we talked previously, similar to what you said, like WordPress, Shopify, which are these no-code applications, there's a lot more now as well where people are able to easily set up stores, online stores. If we're talking about Web2, online web stores, which means more businesses are created. So there is this nice thing where, essentially Web3 Wiz could be the ignition for a lot of other Web3 applications, because now someone who's got a good idea is like, okay, now I don't have to waste £10,000 to hire someone who I met on Telegram and I don't know if he's actually legit or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it cuts through that friction point, because that is what allows more things to get built, more things to fail, but then also more things to succeed, because you need that volume of trial and error to really get something that works really, really well. One thing I found out is a lot of stores that I buy from, comes out they use Shopify or they use like WordPress. They don't really have anyone who built the website for them. They just use Shopify. So it's very interesting to see that this also cuts down a lot of reduces margins, which that means that business could then use to invest into other sides of the operation, which is probably more important for them. So I guess you could, you guys become that cost saver, time saver for a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
Just to move on to things, because you consider yourself a builder, someone who's more on the tech side, and you're now moving on to the sales and marketing side. How have you found switching hats as a founder? Do you know when to move into build or when to move into sales and marketing?
Well, yeah, that's a pretty good question. I mean, I've started a few ventures previously and kind of managed them, hired people, built teams, raised funds, but I have never done this kind of like I have done a lot of B2B sales, but not this B2C, search engine optimization, kind of like network marketing, or even affiliate marketing type of things. And that is something that I find, if I can be honest with you, terrifying in a way, but also super exhilarating, because there's a lot of great resources out there. And I don't know, I just have this, like, I don't know if you've seen, but all the techies are having a bit of existential dread right now because all of the AI tools that are going out there. I mean, yesterday I got a new look for our staking page from my designer, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna contact the slicer because I do have some freelancers I work with. And then I just went online. I was like, let's see if there's any AI tools that can move that into a slice that then I can just, put functionality on. And I was like super skeptical. I was like, I'm gonna try a few of them, just see what happens. And I found a couple of them that was just amazing. So, I didn't have to reach out to my slicer. It just sliced the whole thing, moved it to React. And I'm like, there's gonna be a time where you might just tell the AI something like, can you code an app for me that tracks time for parking purposes or something like that, right? Like whatever you're building, and it's just kind of gonna come up with it. And I mean, I kind of hate to say this, but there's a future where maybe all the techies are like their skills become kind of redundant, or they just move over to AI and kind of repairing and maintaining the future overlord. But and so in that level, I thought that it's about time now to start learning this. And it just feels kind of new. I'm learning all the things. Like when you approach a new field, you're not really sure what's important. You're not really sure what you can omit, what you should be perfect on, and things. So I'm sure I'm making a lot of mistakes along the way. But so far, I'm seeing some results. I'm seeing some people engaging with the product, engaging with the website, engaging with the story of building it. And obviously, I think once we go into some sort of AGI, we might just have like a ideas marketplace where you express those ideas, and they don't necessarily have to be like an idea. It can become something creative, and like can be like a book, can be like a video, like your podcast. And I take that even further. It can even be whole products, right? So hey, I got this great idea, and now the AI is like your extended arm that gives that idea actual functionality, and you can go and test it right away. But to test it and reach the market and things like that, I believe that's the challenging part, because a lot of people can build, but to build something that you can also sell, that's where you hit the mark.
Yeah. I want to get onto the topic of AI in a bit, but just sticking towards the sales and marketing side. How, from your perspective, running this startup, you're doing I see on Twitter you're doing a bit of building online. How have you found have you found any guerrilla tactics? Because I'm guessing you're limited to budget. There's going to be loads of people in your position where it's like, okay, budget is limited. You talked about how, there are these things online such as AI, no code, to assist you to that, they provide these added values. What have been some, I guess, guerrilla tactics, let's just call them, that has worked for you with Web3 Wiz, or that has worked in your previous ventures in order to deliver that growth marketing spurt towards your business?
Yeah, so I think different entrepreneurs master different manners on how they can reach out people. For me, it has always been networking. I love, you said the introvert's dream, but I love hanging out with people, meeting up, learning their stories, just being genuine without having, some hidden agenda. And I think what really happened is that a lot of the good conversations nowadays, they are happening behind closed communities. So there's like a lot of Telegram communities, a lot of Discord communities where people, one way or another, support each other, and they build like these virtual cliques of the internet. And so that's what I learned the last 3 months, how to kind of have a presence in these communities, how to uh, give to people. Like some of the like methods that I've done is I just offer people some free advice on something that they're building, and then they just, usually a lot of times they come back for more. They're like, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you code this? Can we use your app to do this? And somehow there's like that, I guess, that level of reciprocity where if you provide value to someone, they, if they're normal persons, they seek to provide value back. And I think that's my only growth hacking method. Might not be super impressive, but it does work.
Yeah. Jumping onto communities, Telegram, Discord as well, especially for a lot of blockchain Web3 communities is probably the best way, because that is where they are all there. You're definitely on the right channels. You found that, or have you thought about potentially building your own community? Because that's always something that is, I guess, looked at as a great way to source information, A/B testing, that sort of stuff. Is that something you're also looking to do for Web3 Wiz?
Currently not. I've thought about it, but there's just like tremendous efforts undertaken to do that. And I feel that what I'm currently building is kind of like let's call it one-off solution. You gotta, let's say, you have a token like the guys you said you met, and they need a staking page, and they get a smart contract, and then they need an interface, and then they kind of like leave that, and they might not even upgrade that for a couple of years, right? So it's not a very recurring thing. And two, I don't know, there's like people that like to kind of build a following and build their own, let's call it mini cult. The communities do provide that. But what I do instead, because in every community, the people that are kind of valued are the ones who are providing value. So doing a presentation, talking about dApp architecture, something that really benefits everybody. I try to do that with a lot of the communities. So they're not mine, they haven't been started, but I do try my best to provide as much value as I can as a way to help, other people grow their community.
Nice. So you're sort of going in more the natural way of like, I'm going to embed myself within these communities. People are going to get to know me. If they're interested, amazing. If not, this is not my target audience anyway. The ones who are, I get the most valuable feedback from anyway.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think, eventually everybody's a person and they all want to, in a way, share what they're building. And you also want to do the same. So if you find these mutually agreeable connections, uh, that can lead to things like even this podcast recording.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to kind of ask a big question to you now, and I want to move things over to, I guess, the whole blockchain side of things. So big question for you is, we're coming to the Politico with Trump and Kamala. Do you think, blockchain has had its ups and lows, 2021 massive high. Do you still, I know you're someone working in Web3, but do you still see the future for blockchain? And if so, what do you think needs to be changed in order to provide mass adoption?
That's actually a very good question, and we should dive deeper into that topic because I love talking about that. And when I started my journey, I was more of a crypto anarchist, not in a way that I want to overthrow governments. If you look at any governance structure, there's a lot of these layers that are kind of like middlemen, and you can see that a lot with the legal systems. It's kind of almost like a guardian of this middleman, right? The banks, they're kind of surrounded by legal moat, and the same goes for the medical industry. And then you go more into like weapons and car manufacturing and all of these places, like even real estate. And so there's all these middlemen provided there that, in my perspective, they do not provide the value that they extract out of the system, right? Like, even if you want to do some simple transaction, like buy some real estate, which I had to do here in Spain the last couple of months, is that you see that there's all of these middle people, and they get a percentage of the deal, and there's almost like no way to circumvent them. And You look, you go down, you look into like payment processing, you look into banks, you look into, the medical payments, you look into almost all facets of industry. There's a lot of, let's call it, dead weight, right, in our systems. And so my take would be that the crypto would kind of like, or blockchain technology would help kind of break through that and make things more transparent and allow more peer-to-peer, and give people more sovereignty with the things that they own and things that they do. But obviously, the biggest hindrance seems to be the legal world, the regulation, because they have created their moats and there's business models, and they won't allow other players to kind of like get through. And now crypto brought technical innovation, but I don't think we're still at the stage where it brings, let's say, societal innovation on breaking those barriers, right? So think of it like, if you're talking about banks, if you ask somebody in Middle Ages and you said, there's a life possible without kings, they would be like, what? Like, you crazy? Like, let's take them to an asylum place, right? Like they give you 20 reasons why that would be bad and stuff. And so, and so what I think the crypto community, we kind of in some way failed to do is that we didn't assert enough pressure on these legal kind of like burdens placed in front of us. We were more dealing with, I wasn't personally, but I see the community at large dealing a lot with like NFTs and how can I run my next thing. And guys, when Satoshi started this, he didn't want you to sell expensive GPX on the internet. It just wasn't the idea, and so I think we're kind of like stuck in this legal limbo where you have centralized, decentralized, but then anytime you want to do something that is in the real world, and you want to use cryptography to do that, there's also this legal layer that has to go with it. A great example would be real world assets or tokenization, right? So I was lucky to lead the team for the first 5 versions of Ocean Point, which is a product by Block Square, and they do tokenization for real estate around the world. And you got a token that's like cryptographically connected to you. There's no way to falsify it. It shows a share into a system of a property. But then you need all this legal mode around making that token legal, right? Which, if you look at it from an efficiency level, doesn't make a lot of sense because you can kind of embed law into code. But then the lawyers come and the governments and they're like, what? Like that's fugazi. We need a real contract, and I'm going to quote you 20K for a consulting session, And so, so that's just a bit, my rant on where crypto is going overall. In terms of American politics, I really don't see much of a change, There's all the crypto bros and a few of the sisses, and so each candidate has a bit of a speech to try to persuade them over to their camp. And then, of course, once they go into government, they're going to be dealing with different things. And crypto is going to be the last thing on their mind.
Yeah. No, thank you for the rant. I appreciate all rants, vents about this sort of topic because it is, I think, the thing you labeled out really well, which was, the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi. His whole thesis was essentially against central banking, hence Bitcoin. And you're right, in a sense, today is like people have forgotten. It's sort of become, if I'm going to be honest, there is a lot of stuff which is very much a get rich quick scheme for a lot of people, which is a shame because, as someone who is myself also interested in this side of the world, there is a lot of use cases and there is a lot of potential to what you were saying. Like getting rid of the middleman is probably like a really good thing. You get rid of loads of invisible hands who are extracting from that, which could be going to, more useful endeavors. The other thing that I think is really good as well is that whole transparency aspect of blockchain. Yeah. Everything's put on a ledger. Nothing can be, edited or flawed in that sort of sense. also can, I think in a weird sense, it can also help with AI development, because AI is essentially augmenting as much data as possible to give you something like a response. It takes from the internet, but what if you add something from blockchain which is not tampered with, and then you have like legit data, so it feeds into AI as well, which makes AI better, because AI requires data, right? But if that data is false, it doesn't matter. AI is not smart, as much as we like to be like the overlords, Skynet. It really depends on whatever we feed it. If we give it our own voice, it's going to echo our own words. So
Yes.
that's why I think blockchain can also help in the development of this future with AI. But I think there needs to be a lot more people similar to yourself, similar to other people, which are focused more on the realities of blockchain, more so on cutting out these middlemen, more so on actually developing something useful, rather than like, does my monkey coin go up 15,000 times? And I understand a lot of people's I understand people's thesis on meme coins and things like this, because I think there is something unique to it, where it's like, hey, you can actually own something part of culture and society, and you can trade on that. I think that is kind of cool, but there is still that aspect of it, which is like, well, we are just kind of gambling at this moment. We are betting on whether or not this is going to skyrocket.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so true.
yeah,
And to connect to the AI point, if I can, I think you brought a great point on transparency. And there's also the other side of the AI, which a lot of people seem to be concerned about, but the solutions that they are providing is kind of they are a bit odd, and they missed a bit of the point. So think of it, one thing that blockchain tech is great for is governance, right? Democracy, kind of
yeah,
like making sure that whoever has the right authorization does the right things, and bringing kind of like law into code. Okay. Now imagine you have this massive machine that can do everything and runs everything by code, and you try to constrain it with something that is not code. Okay, you see where the fallacy comes in? Like, oh,
yeah,
we're gonna make this large company sign an ethic pledge. Good luck with that. Like, so I think what can happen is the blockchain can be a great tool, and there's a lot of people working on this, but mostly on academic level.
yeah,
Can be a great tool to govern AI, and to kind of make sure that all the stakeholders are honest and they're really providing the decisions that they want to make. It's almost like when Elon Musk took over Twitter, he did the very weird thing where he just published the old algorithm code of Twitter. Oh, this is how the algorithm works, and that's like some old GitHub is still sitting there. But what about this? I would challenge him to make the algorithm into a smart contract so that we can all see in real time how it's making decisions, how it's working. And then you can even have different stakeholders that have different, let's call it like voting power, can be a token, signature, whatever. And they can amend and update the algorithm as it goes on. And anytime they do that, we can all see it. The same would be for like central banks. Central banks kind of like have a lot of levers on different economies, and they're supposed to be democratic, right? There's like some, representative democracy. They pretty much, have a few people that make decisions. And then the rules should be in practice, in theory, sorry, uh, the same for everybody. Guess who can apply the same rules to every single case? I introduce you Ethereum smart contracts, ta-da! And no one can change it unless you have the right authorizations. So these cases are great for these kind of smart contracts. But here's the issue. The incentives are not aligned for companies, governments, etc., to become transparent and to work this way. There's simply nobody that can benefit, and there's a lot of people who will lose power, money, etc. Right? And so that's why crypto and Satoshi, the whole thing, came over as kind of like a revolt against these, institutions, decision maker algorithms, etc., that were supposed to be fair and square and honest and transparent and democratic, and they weren't.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you've led on very nicely to a very, I know we've moved away from sort of entrepreneurship, but I still think these are great holistic topics to talk about. But that whole thing you're just talking about now is essentially what the blockchain was built for. How do we build a trustless society where I don't need to worry about the government? I want to trust the government. How do I not worry? And I can see, which is great. And you're right, the incentives aren't there for us to be trustless, because someone somewhere, whether it's power dynamics, whether it's money, influence, has to be there to in order to extract some sort of value, because to be honest, is the only value they can get. However, I want to, I'm currently in the middle of reading Why Nation Fails and Fail, and it goes on to about extractive inclusion, extractive economies taking. And one of the things it brings out, which I think is really interesting for blockchain and what you mentioned, is, actually, if you do make things a little bit more democratic, you allow everyone that sort of same head start, your economy, your nation state will flourish more, because again, you've got more volume of ideas, whether flourishing or failing, but that is what leads to success. And it's interesting, we're from Albanian ethnicities. I'm from Albania, you're from Kosovo. The move, I'm talking primarily from an Albanian perspective, the move from a sort of communist state, which was very much extractive, to then moving to some sort of weird oligarchical state, which is still just, people just switching sides. It's the same people, they just switch sides. And it's like, well, hey, if you go to them and be like, hey, do you guys want to be transparent? They'll be like, hell no. Because we have no other value to provide other than extracting, from the wealth we stole during the Civil War. So it's this sort of thing where it's like, those people don't want to give up power. But at the same time, if you look at history, those things change sporadically. They don't change over time. It changes like within an instant. The French Revolution, within an instant. Do you get what I'm saying? So it could be something where it takes that societal push where everyone's like, you know what, screw this. Everyone has to be transparent about X, Y, Z. And then it forces that change, which, it does link back to, the whole topic of building entrepreneurship, because again, in order for people to more, there has to be a trust. Because, why would I want to build in? And this is actually kind of, sorry to keep rambling, but this is kind of a common thing across European countries. Why do I want to build in the UK when I'm going to get taxed and I don't know where my money's going? And it's like, well, I might as well just move to America, where America is more entrepreneurship, startup friendly. And so it's kind of moving away to this thing where it's like people are becoming less trustworthy of their, of their governments. And it's something that could tilt where, in the favor of blockchain.
Yeah. No, I think, I like how this conversation is resembling that meme where it says, I won't get political. And then it's like 2 drinks later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, US, they had the revolution, and it was a lot to do with taxes. So that's the thing. And, obviously, like now moving over to Europe, it's just, we're kind of falling behind in a lot, because I've been living in EU for about 8 years now. And, we're falling behind in a global level, because, China is doing great. The rest of the Asia is doing great. US have had like, if I recall seeing some accurate chart a few months ago in Economist, over the last couple of years, they have doubled their purchasing power in a lot of parts of US in relation to Europe. And here it's just like very fragmented with the smaller states that each have their own, again, it's about power, right? They want to keep the power. They want, if you're incorporating a company in Czech Republic, the government there wants you to follow certain rules. And then if you do that in France, they want the same. And then if you're in France, but you want to sell to, let's say, Austrians, then the Austrian government might have something to say with that, right? So it's like you're trying to do business, but there's all of these hindrances along the way. And then I see a lot of EU startups, they have to hire a lot of people just to deal with these complexities, right? Like if, and then what happens is, I mentioned France, but it's the case in a lot of places. You hire a lot of people. Well, guess what? If you hire someone in Europe, you can't fire them anymore. It's so tough to fire people.
Yeah,
And so it's just made for corporations, right? Like a good friend of mine, a guy, a childhood friend from Germany, he says Germany is a massive corporation, and it's just how it is. And you try to break some of these modes, and again, who do you get as the main line of defense? Legal, right? You cannot get. You need a license for this, a license for that. You don't qualify for this, and whereas in US, it's like, here, take my $5, open up my LLC. I'm gonna go pitch. There's a lot of wealthy people that might believe in me. They give me some starting capital. Everybody that I try to sell, they give me a straight yes or no. Is it better? Is it worse? And it just works, and that's why the economy is booming over there, and they're doing things like SpaceX and stuff like that, and we're kind of having our cheap thrills out here in Europe. But UK, of course, is it's much better. But if you come to the continental EU, then you can really feel the difference.
Yeah, I think you nailed a few things. One, the growth of America, but also China, and there's a common theme going around Europe where people are like, well, if we don't develop, if we don't change our ways, in the future we're just going to have to decide: do we want to be a Chinese colony or do we want to be an American colony?
Yeah,
and that is the truth. We have not really been, let's just be honest, live players as much in comparison to maybe America or China. And the other thing as well that I think you nailed on the head is that legality of it. There is a lot of bureaucracy within Europe, even in England, still so. And I think I can speak for the UK, being a UK resident. The UK, I mean, they're trying to change their ways. They've got, they do really want to still be at the forefront. But I still think, similar to what you mentioned, there's a lot of people like, people in finance, people in legal, people in management consulting. These guys, they're not the creative geniuses, entrepreneurs who are going to push that side of things. They're the ones who keep things in checks and balances. But when you really need to push things in order to challenge, those guys need to take a step down and be like, hey, we need to put these crazy guys up front, these guys who are willing to risk it, and they're the ones who need the backing.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the main issues with the UK. A lot of people call the UK sort of like a museum. Once a great empire, now just kind of there, like, love us, guys, please, we're still here. Which is, I also feel like that's the case for all of Europe. It's got this. It looks in the mirror and it sees a lion, but in reality, it's probably a cat compared to the rest of the world. It's just a lot of levels of bureaucracy and power dynamics that it still has. Whereas I think a lot of the news, if we're looking at where the future is going, it's not really doing much.
Yeah.
There was a really funny thing someone posted. I think the EU was regulating AI and making a lot of these like posts. And someone commented on it where it was like, the EU is posting pictures as if they have developed space travel, all about like regulations. It's like, that is the main difference. We're so focused on legality, regulations, rather than actually developing anything like, hey, how do we get people from A to B a lot quicker and X, Y, Z?
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. And I think you provided some amazing analogies. You ask the young people, like, what do you want to be or do? And, you hear a lot of people, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. And there's a lot of lawyers and stuff. And there's just, make everything so lawyered up. And, yeah, it stifles growth. And then but also like, I'm a bit hopeful because there's a lot of smart people in Europe, and especially the young people. They kind of travel a lot now. They see everything. We're culturally integrated with US at some level, more some countries more than others.
Mm.
And what happens is that once we do that, then there's a lot of movement towards deregulation and kind of, even some cases federalization of the whole Europe, because people are figuring out that, a Polish person is not that, super different from a Czech and an Italian from a French and so on and so forth. And they're like, okay, we live in this vast world. It's not just us, because if it's just us, yeah, you like cheese and I like this. But then you check the other powers and how they're consolidating, and you're like you're saying, we might just be like a museum. And I think the younger generations and my generation, etc., we should really be aware that there's always glass ceilings that they do, they're kind of like there to stop you as an innovator, and they're not there to kind of like enhance your experience. And so we should gather together, like a great guy that I follow on Twitter is Level Zio, which is like Peter Levels. And he was criticizing a lot the head of innovation in the EU. It was just a guy who went from a large corporation to another. Now he's almost retired, and his whole innovation strategy is like, well, corporations, they should have innovation labs. And a massive bank does an innovation lab, and they spend a little bit of money there, and we're all like, oh, look, we got all these guys changing the world, right? And so what happens, he was criticizing that a lot, and then I think EU replaced him for some reason. And so there's all this like accelerate Europe kind of movements,
Yeah.
where people are just like, screw the old ways. Let's get on and build some business and have some revenue, and let's bring some wealth to the old continent.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of European acceleration movement.
Yeah.
I've been on those Twitter threads, and they make a lot of great points. And I think I always feel like these things come because things are in a pendulum. When something's so regular, then there has to be something on the other side to bring it back to its level, and that is why we have these people on Twitter, like European accelerationists, who are like, hey, this has gone too much to this level. We need to like really bring it back down.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if we bring it back down to the basic human levels, people want to live a good life. They want to do what they love. But if that gets restricted, if that's sort of like, well, what's the point? Like, I can't set up my business in this country because I got to do this, that. I got to pay this person, that person. Then it's like, well, what's the point? And then they're forced, like you said, you made a great point. The ideal for the person becomes then become a lawyer, become an accountant, work for this corporation rather than do something for yourself. And
Yes.
couldn't say that, you've literally nailed it on the head with that, because as someone who works for ALSA, where we are a charity and we host a lot of events for students, our biggest turn-ups are lawyers, accountants, people in finance.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is there, and we had a great turnout, but it's not as much compared to those two. Those two get bookings left, right, center, like the amount of events we host for those. And it shows you the different mindsets that people have in the UK and places like this.
And this is for the Albanian network, right?
Yes, this is the Albanian network. So Albanian Student Association, ALSA, that I currently work with, that you are on.
Yeah.
But here with.
In all honesty, if your parents immigrated, and if you're kind of like a young, like a one generation or two generation immigrant to a wealthier country from a poorer one, like my parents didn't immigrate, I did it myself, but like most of your Albanian diaspora in Europe, it might be a good way for upward mobility to become a lawyer, right? Because you're coming from a, let's say, poorer background, and that, you don't want to be gambling around with startups and stuff. Like if you look at, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and they're all like offshoots, but they also had quite a cushion to make mistakes along the way, right? So then, we might see that these lawyers might have kids who are like, well, you know what, I'm not going to go to lawyer school anymore. I might just build something with my friends in the garage. And so I totally see why that would be the case. And we appreciate all of our shout out to all the Albanian accountants and lawyers and the ones that make the world go round.
Yeah, no, you bring some valuable insight into that. And it's true, a lot of people, like my parents, it's when you're not as educated, when you come from a background where, the country's not really like supporting you to them moving here, your parents, maybe not force you, but you also as a young person, you bet on like what can guarantee me or what has the highest probability of like survival, like where, yes, if I go on to law, I know I can make this amount of money, XYZ, and I'm going to be cushy. Same with the
Mhm.
finance and these sort of things. But then you also bring up the valuable thing in that, maybe their kids will be the entrepreneurs because they will have that cushion and able to
Yeah,
risk. And I think that is the key thing if we look at everything is like, in order for people to take risks, there needs to be a little bit of that safety net that they know that, hey, if I fail, it's not gonna hurt me that much. Like, yeah, sure, it might hurt my initial investment, but it's not gonna send me like 20 years back.
yeah,
Because that's why, people in first world countries are able to innovate because it's like, I can keep doing startup because there's an ecosystem. I fail
yeah,
1, 2 businesses, I can still keep going because my
yeah,
insights are still valuable. You know, people are going to still
exactly.
hire me. People are still, and that is what's important as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that was kind of like my start. I started off as a software developer, graduated Sheffield and then I was like, okay, I got a bit of a cushion. Let me try for, higher stars. And you do that. And then, you're like very mindful about it. You're like, okay, this worked a bit. That one might work a bit better. And then you're like, okay, doesn't seem to work. Let's go back to doing what I know how to do. Right. So I think it's all of these like back and forths that you can do. But I think you might be able to do that more with tech career than with, let's say, like a doctor career or a
Yeah.
lawyer career or, like even as a mechanic, you can work for a few years, then you got your own shop. And before you know it, you can be like that Albanian guy from Italy who made his own car.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've seen that case. It doesn't seem
I
to have an
have.
engine, but it's pretty.
There is also someone else who I would recommend, founder of Timac, who we've interviewed, lovely
Mhm.
lady Arieta. She did something similar where was able to build a cushion and then actually start a company in Albania
Mm,
and develop ambulances, police vehicles, and I believe, is now developing armored vehicles for the army as well. So
mm,
there is stuff going about even back home. Things are slowly,
mhm,
turning around, but I think it's so important for, people like her, like us, to share these
mhm,
insights, to showcase to people that, hey, look, we're also here in this world. We're also into this sort of stuff. Because then it allows for that networking that you were talking about, which
mhm,
allows for a transfer of ideas, and a transfer of
mhm.
ideas allows for innovation. And when you have
Yeah.
that, that's where things can really skyrocket.
Yeah, that's so true. And yeah, shout out to all the Albanian ladies doing hard work in all categories. I think they had this Shota is their newest model. I saw that.
Yeah.
It's like an armored car, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, even back home, it's even in some cases it's even better because one, you don't have like these rigid systems like they're already established in Europe for 100 years with lawyers and this and that. And two, you got a lot of young people. A
Mm,
lot of them are not qualified to be able to make massive impact, but if they apply themselves, they can bring tremendous growth. And then number three is because you don't have all these structures, you can leapfrog, right? Like Kosovo has better internet access percentage wise than let's say Germany, right?
mm,
Because they did build all the telecom systems, etc. And Kosovo was kind of like bombed and there was like war and stuff. And afterwards, they're like, we don't need to deal with the cabling. Everything was fresh. So you leapfrog to fiber, you leapfrog to like antennas, and we can do that the same. I see also in Albania, there's a lot of e-governance stuff going on. People apply for stuff online. They just get it really quick. In Kosovo, we even have like a document ATM, which I love. You go there, you put in your card, you need a birth certificate, you put in like your €1, and it prints it for you, like a train ticket.
Yeah.
And so there's all of these things that if you try to do something like that somewhere in Central Europe, you're gonna have to lobby for it for years, and there's gonna be associations suing you, and there's gonna be the data security and cyber. It's just like never gonna be done. And so that's a lot of benefit in that. And two, we have awesome proximity to a very wealthy market, which is Europe. And even US, you can ship stuff. I know companies who are shipping stuff from Doros straight to New York.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, I think what we need is, on the Kosovo side, there's a lot of more electricity needed, like ways to produce. Albania, by the way, I think is one of the most hydro-energetic producing
Yeah.
countries of whole Europe,
Yeah.
which is a really great thing because, already ready for the green revolution.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so there's all of these advantages, and I see entrepreneurs making amazing steps doing that. Just we need a little bit longer window of thinking than
Yeah.
the short one.
I yeah,
Yeah.
I think in terms of Albania, that long-term thinking is definitely needed. I think I've had like multiple discussions and I've written blog posts about lack of entrepreneurship because compared to Kosovo, it's actually very different. And out of people I've interviewed, a lot of them have been from Kosovo. A lot more entrepreneurs, business starters, that sort of things compared to Albania. And I think you mentioned something which is true. You guys don't have those legacies that people have to abide to. In Albania, there's still those legacies. There's still the old guard. I mentioned before to you that a lot of people, when communism ended, they didn't run away. They just switched sides and they became the new, right? So they're still there and they still have that similar thinking. They're just older now. And it's a shame because that has led to a lot of the brain drain, where they're not tackling real long-term issues. They're tackling short-term issues. And which is a shame because, again, you mentioned some great things. It is ripe for a booming economy. Tourism is there. The green energy is there. If it's able to keep its young people there in order to build, but also bring back diaspora, make it attractive for diaspora to come back and build, then I think you have like a fledgling economy which is able to be built back up. But one of the main issues, in my opinion, is that when you do that, you get rid of a lot of people in power who are a bit too cushy in their position. Because that's the
Yes.
thing. It's whenever you build these new economies, it's the same with tech. At one point, Bill Gates and, Jeff Bezos weren't people of power. Now, all of a sudden, they're at the top and people are like, how the hell did they get there? It
Yeah.
changes the market share of power. So when you're
Yeah.
able to input that, some people don't like that because it means that they're not going to follow
Exactly.
what we want, what our rules are. But I think it's a
Exactly.
balancing act that the government has to take what is more important, and I think at the moment, probably innovation, young people, high energy, high urgency is probably more important than some old legacy people who just want to extract.
Yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true. And Europe is so far. People immigrate, then they take a 1 hour flight and they're back to
Yeah.
their hometown. So, I don't see it as a one-way thing. It's a great example is Poland. They used to have immigrants everywhere, but I think for the last decade or two, a lot of people are repatriating. They're going back from Chicago, from other places. They're like, I had a shop and I'm gonna make a shop back home, and it's
Poland is a very good example because I know quite a few Albanian entrepreneurs who've actually moved to Poland to set up shop there, and they say it's working really, really well.
well, wow, that's
Yeah,
great.
so it is very, very interesting. They've got a massive tech hub there, loads of developers, people are getting paid well,
Mm,
which I think is great. And
yeah.
it's something that I think a lot of developing countries should also look into is how do we
Mm,
take the best and ignore the worst to develop our own
mm,
systems.
that's true. Yeah. Yeah, they
Yeah.
also are pretty good at law and order, but I think if we open up that topic, we're gonna hang out for another hour.
Yeah, we might have to. We can have that topic on Twitter Spaces where people where people can join us. A big topic. Nice. I guess, look, we're coming to the end of the podcast. One question I love to ask all my guests is, what books, if you are a reader, what books you would recommend to, to young entrepreneurs or to people interested in business, blockchain, whatever it is. If you could recommend 3, 1, however many books, what books would you recommend? And they can be any topic. We've had people recommend fiction books. We've had people recommend psychology books.
Yeah.
What would your books be?
Well, I think a book that I really read quite early and that gave me these great insights, and I keep going back to every couple of years. It has a cliche title. It's like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I think these habits kind of like got ingrained in me quite early. And I just keep rotating them. And the older I get, the more significance it seems to have. Because to be an entrepreneur, you got to be very effective. That's the thing. And how do you get to be effective? It's really key. And yeah, so I would kind of maybe leave it at that. There's also the, how to win friends and influence people. I think that's also a good one, because on your journey, if you want to go quick, go alone. But if you want to go far, you will need to build teams. And how do you build teams is by building interpersonal relationships. And yeah, so these 2 I would say are kind of classics. And yeah, I've also been reading some other stuff lately, but I won't throw it out there because I'm still on the edge.
Yeah, you don't want to give a recommendation in case if it turns out rubbish.
Yeah, because I'm like 70% in, but you never know.
You never know what that ending is going to be like.
Yeah.
Before, I guess before we end things off, what would you say out of the book, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People? What would you say is one of the best habits you've taken on?
Well, the one that I love all of them, but the one that I'm kind of applying the last few weeks by building this app is kind of like sharpen the saw, I think is number 7. It's like, if you are gonna cut a tree, I mean, I know it goes antithesis to the green agenda, but if you're gonna cut a tree, spend it's like 7 hours. If you got 8 hours to do it, let's say it's a massive tree, spend 7 hours sharpening the saw and 1 hour cutting it. And that goes for a lot of the tech work. Figuring out what to build is most important than just getting in and doing massive loads of work. And it's just something I'm applying over as I'm building these crypto latest apps. It's like I'm trying to get them so sharp that when I actually get to work, they're going to be something remarkable.
Amazing. That's very, very insightful. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was a very insightful call. I know we're going to have more conversations around loads of politics now later on. I guess, feel free to shout out your business, where people can find you on Twitter, LinkedIn, if you want. So feel free. I'll be adding it onto the YouTube link below. So feel free to shout it out.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for having. It's been great chatting with you on and off record. And yeah, the website is Web3, number 3, Wiz with a WZZ.com. And I'm on Twitter with my handle, Gashi Dite. And then on LinkedIn with my name, Dite Gashi. Looking forward to connect with all kinds of people. And I wish you a great weekend.